So let's start chapter 3 here in AMP 1. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick us off from right where we left off in chapter 2, and that's looking at cellular respiration. And these are the biochemical reactions that extract energy from molecules. So, two ways in which we extract energy from molecules. One is with oxygen and one is without oxygen. So let's take a look at with oxygen, and this is known as aerobic respiration. So this is a breakdown of glucose in the presence of oxygen to produce energy. All right, so this is showing aerobic respiration over here, and so this occurs in the mitochondria. All right, and so this is why the mitochondria, we say, produce energy for the cell. So one glucose is going to make anywhere from 32 to 34 ATP through aerobic respiration. The byproducts from this are carbon dioxide and water. All right, so we completely break down the glucose into ATP here. In anaerobic respiration, this is an incomplete breakdown of glucose without oxygen to produce energy. All right, so this occurs in our cytoplasm. All right, so here one glucose is only going to make 2 ATP, and that's it. The byproducts of this is lactic acid, and that's a problem with this. This can cause our muscles to fatigue. Okay, so let's switch directions here, and now let's talk about the plasma membrane. The plasma membrane is the boundary of the cell. So when we look at this cell here, this is the plasma membrane right there. Okay, so this is a bilayer made of phospholipids and proteins. All right, and it's going to regulate what enters and exits the cell. And it's said to be a selectively permeable membrane. So it's choosing which stuff can move through and which stuff can't. So to understand how it's a selectively permeable membrane, we need to look at the structure of the plasma membrane. Okay, so if we go to this picture here, this is showing just the plasma membrane. Now I will say our plasma membranes are not blue. This is colorized so we can see it better. So let's first look at lipids that are found in the plasma membrane. So the first are phospholipids. So these here are phospholipids. So with a phospholipid, they have what is known as a phosphate head. So that's a phosphate head right there. And then they also have these fatty acid tails, which are right here. All right. So the phosphate head is said to be hydrophilic. So hydrophilic means that it is water-loving. That's literally what it means. Hydro means water, philia means to love. So these are molecules that are attracted to water. Another way to think about these is hydrophilic molecules can dissolve in water. All right, so these would be, polar molecules or ionic molecules. The other part of this are the fatty acid tails. Now those fatty acid tails are hydrophobic. So phobia, it means to fear. So that literally means water fearing. So these are molecules that are repelled by water, right? So they don't dissolve in water, so they're non-polar, all right? So phospholipids are great molecules to use for membranes because they have one part that likes water and one part that doesn't like water, okay? So when you place phospholipids into water, what's going to happen is just like what you see up here on the screen, is that the phosphate heads will orient towards the water, and the fatty acid tails will move away from water and towards each other. So kind of doing this, they'll do that, all right? And so what that creates is it creates this large hydrophobic area here in between, all right? So if you're a molecule, all right, and you want to get through here down to the other side, the only way that you can do that is if you are also hydrophobic, okay? And so, anything that can dissolve in water cannot pass through this membrane, and that includes water. Water can't do that either, which is really, really good, because if water could pass through here, then this membrane could dissolve away, which would be very, very bad. Anytime you try to take a shower, you would literally dissolve away. So it's really good that water cannot get through here. Okay, so let's take a look at some other things, other lipids that are found in the plasma membrane. Oh, what's also nice about this is it creates a nice interface between outside of a cell and inside of a cell. So this can be a very different solution than out here. All right, so let's go back to the previous picture. And what we see on this previous picture is you're seeing these little yellow guys here, and those are cholesterol. And cholesterol helps stabilize the plasma membrane. keeps it together. Next on here, you're seeing these long chain things attached to a phospholipid, and those are known as glycolipids. This is a phospholipid with a carbohydrate attached. And these guys are used in cell recognition. So I'll explain cell recognition when I talk about the next thing, which you see here and here. So looking at proteins in our plasma membrane. So these guys here are glycoproteins. So they are a protein with a carbohydrate attached. All right? These are also used in cell recognition. So these are things that are going to help identify cells that belong to us versus cells that do not belong to us. So we have these things called white blood cells, and white blood cells are defensive cells. And so they basically go around looking for things that don't belong to us, like bacteria or fungus or parasitic worms or whatever it might be. And if they bump into these other cells, and those other cells have the wrong glycolipids or glycoproteins, these identification tags, then those white blood cells are going to try to kill them. They bump into our cells, and they go, oh, you got the right ID, I'm going to leave you alone. All right? So another example of glycoproteins are blood types. Or blood types are different types of glycoproteins. All right? So if you have A blood, you produce A glycoprotein. If you have B blood, you produce a B glycoprotein. If you have AB blood, you produce both the A and the B glycoproteins. If you have O blood, well, you don't make this glycoprotein set. And so this shows a little loophole in our defensive systems. If you lack identification tags altogether, our white blood cells leave you alone. All right? So this enables us to put metals and plastics into us, like teeth fillings, knee replacements, and stuff like that. So unless you have an allergy, and that's an overactive immune response, your white blood cell thinks there's something in you that's harming you, when in fact it's not. All right, moving on to other proteins found in here. Next are cell adhesion molecules. These are proteins that bind cells to one another. All right. Well, one of the problems about our plasma membrane is that only hydrophobic molecules can pass through it. All right. So hydrophilic molecules cannot. So what we have to have are what are known as transport proteins. These are proteins that are going to move substances across the plasma membrane. Because, we're going to need water in our cells. We're going to need glucose into our cells. So this one right here is trying to show what is known as a channel protein. These are proteins that act as holes in the plasma membrane. So for most parts with these channel proteins, they're going to act like a straw if you just poke a straw through the plasma membrane. And what can get through a straw? Well, anything small enough to get through a straw. So these guys are just size selective. So if you're a small enough molecule, you can move through these channel proteins. Now, some of these are what we call gates. So the gates are channel proteins that open and close under certain circumstances. So like through an electrical charge or if another molecule binds to it. Next are carrier proteins. So this is showing some of those gates that I mentioned there. So next are carrier proteins. And a carrier protein, these are proteins that are going to move specific substances across the plasma membrane. So here, we can see, it combines, so it moves it across. Sometimes carrier proteins, move stuff by diffusion. Sometimes it requires energy. So just to let you know, all the cells in our body need glucose in them. So all the cells in our body have carrier proteins specific to glucose. Now, those carrier proteins aren't always active, right? So they need another molecule known as insulin to activate those carrier proteins to allow the glucose into our body cells. Next are enzymes. Enzymes are typically found along membrane along membranes, and this allows certain reactions to occur within the cell or certain reactions to occur outside of the cell. Okay, so lastly are receptor proteins. Receptor proteins are proteins that receive and transmit messages into the cell. So here you're going to have some chemical signal bind to these receptor proteins, and you're going to have some intercellular response. So, you turn around a corner and there's a bear there, right? Your heart rate's going to increase, your breathing's going to increase, your blood pressure's going to increase, you're going to sweat, right? And that's all caused by adrenaline, or what we're going to call in this class norepinephrine. It's going to bind to these receptors in your heart, in your lungs, in your blood vessels, and so on. And the whole idea there with adrenaline is to get energy and oxygen to our skeletal muscles so we can react very quickly. So, you know, you see a bear, secrete adrenaline, hopefully you run away from that situation. Okay, so